So, what does it actually sound like when someone stands up and alleges that their own country is preparing for a genocide? Today, we're going to break down a really powerful speech by Indian actor and activist Prakash Raj, who makes that exact claim. Now, our goal here isn't to verify what he's saying, but to deconstruct his argument piece by piece to understand how he builds such an alarming case. Let's dive in. Right off the bat, he drops this bombshell of a claim. And this isn't some throwaway line. It's the absolute core of his entire argument. It's a huge accusation, and the rest of his speech is all about trying to explain why he believes this is true. Okay, so before we go any further, just a quick and really important note. Our job here is not to fact-check or debunk any of this. We are simply taking the speaker's arguments exactly as he presented them and breaking them down so we can all understand the logic and the evidence he is using to back up his position. So, to really get a grip on his thinking, we've broken his speech into 5 main parts. We're going to start with that startling claim itself. Then, we'll dig into why he thinks the justice system has failed. From there, we'll try to uncover this unseen power he talks about, look at the timeline of events he uses as proof, and finally, we'll get to what he claims is the terrifying end goal of all this. All right, so let's start with part 1, that absolutely shocking claim of a preparation for genocide. I mean, a statement that serious needs specifics, right? And the speaker is very, very clear about who he believes is being targeted. According to Prakash Raj, this whole thing, this alleged preparation for genocide, is aimed squarely at Muslims, tribal people, and other minorities. He's not saying this is some random, accidental outcome. No, he's arguing it's a deliberate agenda. So, what evidence does he actually offer to support a charge this heavy? Well, his first target is the country's institutions. And that brings us to the second pillar of his argument, what he calls the failure of justice. For any democracy to work, people have to trust its institutions. Prakash Raj's argument is that this trust has been completely shattered, especially when it comes to the courts. He paints this picture of a really dramatic and tragic collapse. This slide really captures the shift he's talking about. He remembers a time when saying, "We will see you in court," was a promise. It was this belief that, at the end of the day, you had one last hope for justice. But now, according to him, that hope has totally curdled into outright condemnation. And this quote, wow, it really shows you just how deep his disillusionment goes. He isn't just saying the courts are failing to give people justice, he's accusing them of actively killing justice. In his mind, the one institution that's supposed to be the neutral referee has actually become part of the problem. So, if the speaker thinks the institutions have failed, who does he believe is really pulling the strings? This gets us to his next crucial point. He says people are fighting the wrong enemy. To explain this, he uses this really powerful metaphor of a lotus in a pond. He's arguing that everyone is focused on the flower, the visible political party whose symbol is the lotus, but he says that's a huge mistake. The real power, he claims, is the unseen root system in the pond that's feeding it from way down below. So here's the breakdown of that analogy. He identifies the ruling political party, the BJP, as the visible lotus that everyone sees. But he argues its real power, its real strength, comes from the RSS, a massive, deep-rooted nationalist organization, which he calls the pond. His whole point is that you can't just fight the party. You have to understand the powerful ideology that's propping it all up. Okay, so if there's this unseen power at work, how does it actually show itself? Well, that leads us to his next section, which he calls a chronology of impunity. He starts connecting a series of events that might seem separate, arguing that they aren't random at all, but part of a repeating, deliberate pattern. Let's just walk through the 4 steps he lays out. First, he points to the silencing of dissent, mentioning the killings of activists who spoke out against Hindutva, a right-wing political ideology. Second, suspects with alleged ties to certain groups are arrested. Third, after years, they get out on bail. And then, the final, and for him, the most crucial step, he claims that when they're released, these suspects are publicly celebrated, welcomed back as heroes by their supporters. So for the speaker, this 4-step process isn't just a failure of the justice system, he sees it as proof that the system is in on it. He argues that this pattern sends a very clear message that certain actions will go unpunished and that the ultimate goal is to shut down all dissent and, as he puts it, to kill the democracy. And this is where he brings it all together. After laying out who the targets are, the institutional collapse, the hidden power structure, and this alleged pattern of impunity, he puts all the pieces together to describe what he believes is the ultimate endgame. He claims this final agenda has three main parts. First, the goal is to bring in the Manusmriti, an ancient and pretty controversial Hindu text that lays out a very strict social hierarchy, to replace the current legal system. Second, to fundamentally rewrite India's secular constitution. And what's the supposed result of all these changes? Well, to officially create a class of secondary citizens out of the same minority groups he talked about at the very beginning. But he doesn't end his speech on a note of defeat. Not at all. He ends with a call to action. He frames this whole thing as a battle of narratives, a fight between lies and truth. And he's urging his audience to just keep speaking out, to keep telling the truth no matter how many times they feel they're being lied to. And that really leaves us with a critical question, doesn't it? Prakash Raj's entire argument is built on connecting the dots, linking assassinations, court rulings, and political ideology into one single, coherent, and frankly, terrifying story. It's an incredibly powerful way to make a point. The question for all of us is, how do we, as citizens, critically evaluate these kinds of narratives? How do we tell the difference between a real pattern and just a coincidence? And ultimately, how do we decide for ourselves where the truth really lies?